All right. Chapter 2, Section 2. How and why did international tensions remain high between 1920 and 1923? Treaty of Versailles, generally unpopular. Paris Peace Conference, generally unpopular, as not everyone got what they wanted or expected. Speaking of the treaty, it's going to be negotiated between the U.S., Britain, and France. Remember, U.S. didn't really want to punish Germany all that much because they were fearful of resentment. Britain was kind of like midway, wanting Germany to be able to recoup themselves later on to use the beneficial trade partner. And then France wanted them to be punished until the end of time so that they could never gain power again. Now, Treaty of Versailles is going to be rejected by the U.S. because the U.S. wants to go back to isolationism. Isolationism is foreign policy, not being involved in world affairs. You're promoting your own country's interests instead of being involved in the business of others. And the cost of World War I was really, really great in terms of cost. That means like money, of course, but also like lives and resources. Republicans, they're going to favor isolationism. Democrats favored Woodrow Wilson and the 14 points and internationalism, but ultimately, the U.S. is going to reject the Treaty of Versailles, and they're going to return to isolationism unless its own interests are threatened, and we'll get into that later. But for the most part, the U.S. is going to consider themselves isolationists. Now, another country, source of tension, Russia. They're not going to be a part of the negotiations because as much as they're big and powerful, potentially, they were fighting the Russian Revolution during World War I. They dropped out in 1917. They become communist over time. Other countries, they're fearful of communism. So Russia is going to be pretty isolated. They're not going to be invited to the Paris Peace Conference, mainly on the behest of France. In other changes in Italy, Benito Mussolini is going to take power in Italy. He's going to want to expand Italy's territory. He's eventually going to install a fascist style of government. Fascism is a political ideology. It's authoritarian, meaning you have just all the power focused at the top. Extreme nationalism. Also, we'll talk more about Italian expansion and Benito Mussolini later on. But Germany also, hyperinflation is going to make the value of money plummet while the cost of goods are going to skyrocket. This is going to cause plenty of hardship. It's going to cause starvation. It's going to cause unemployment. Weimar Republic, and by the way, Germany's kind of referred to as the Weimar Republic at this point, they're going to struggle to maintain the people. They're going to have issues with money and their economy and the government, making all of this even worse. The government's really weak. They can't really do anything to fix the problem. People believe that the government's weak. That means problems get worse if the government cannot take care of its people. They're still faced with the blame for the war under the War Guilt Clause of the Treaty of Versailles, which they are forced to accept. Reparations also had to be paid, even though the economy and the government's still weak and they barely have any money as it is. The economic problems caused Germany to stop paying reparations. France and Belgium from that are then going to take an industrious area of Germany known as the Ruhr as compensation for not being paid reparations. The Ruhr is Germany's most industrious area, has a lot of resources, has a lot of like timber, that's just wood, but this makes inflation even worse from the loss of this vital region and this loss of resources. This becomes known as the Ruhr crisis, and we'll talk about what the resolution to the Ruhr crisis is in 2.3. But anyway, Italy, they're going to contribute to tensions with the Corfu incident. Italy had been suffering economic problems since the 1910s from inflation, and into the 1920s, situation doesn't really get any better. The Italian government, they face a good amount of problems since they can't fix the problems themselves, so they're going to face opposition from the people and from other political parties. Communism is actually one that's going to threaten takeover of the Italian government. But anyway, at the time, Italy still is a monarchy. They still have a king and a queen, but Benito Mussolini led the Italian fascists against the communist opposition, regularly striking against them. And the king of Italy actually asks Mussolini to form a new government, and Italy is going to become fascist. Again, fascism is authoritarian, a lot of nationalism, a lot of emphasis on subservience. But anyway, Mussolini, he wanted to make Italy big and powerful, and he's going to begin to violate the Paris peace settlements by expanding into Yugoslavia. So Italy is going to begin expanding. August 1923, 4 Italians are going to be killed while the League of Nations is trying to resolve a border dispute between Greece and Albania. And Mussolini is then going to order the Italian troops to invade the Greek island of Corfu to make up for it. Greece is going to appeal to the League of Nations, and the League of Nations tells Italy to get out, but Italy doesn't accept this decision. They actually go against it. In fact, they wind up appealing elsewhere. They wind up appealing to the Council of Ambassadors, who winds up making a ruling in Italy's favor, much more to their liking. So in return for killing 4 Italians, Greece is going to pay Italy a substantial amount of money in order to resolve the Corfu incident, as this is known as. Corfu incident, this begins to show us that the League of Nations is kind of flawed in that Italy was in the League, but the League ruled against Italy. Italy doesn't listen and instead goes searching for a ruling that would be beneficial to them, and that's exactly what they wind up getting in the Council of Ambassadors. So what does the League do to punish Italy for not abiding by the covenant of the League that they agreed to when they joined the League? Well, Nothing. Britain and France, the other more powerful nations on the League, see Mussolini, Italy, as a powerful ally against communism. It was a great concern that a member of the League took such action, sure, but the League's goal is to keep peace and encourage cooperation, and this is anything but that. Britain and France, they dislike communism so much to the point where then this occurs, and beyond just general concern, there isn't really any huge repercussions. Other instances of tension is going to come from Turkey. The Ottoman Empire, before it was Turkey, treaty from the Paris Peace Conference was the Treaty of Sevres that dealt with the Ottoman Empire. However, Kemal Ataturk takes power and establishes the Republic of Turkey. Well, the Ottoman Empire technically doesn't exist anymore. And since Sevres was with the Ottoman Empire, Turkey is going to reject the Treaty of Sevres and claim back some of the land that was taken away from the Ottomans by the Paris Peace Conference. The Treaty of Lausanne is going to be hammered out in its place. The Treaty of Lausanne is going to replace the Treaty of Sevres and recognize Kemal Ataturk's independent government of Turkey. It's going to rid Turkey of foreign influence. It's going to give back some of the land that was taken from the Ottoman Empire under the Paris Peace Conference. And this is going to be the first official real challenge to the Paris Peace Conference and the treaties that came from it. Now, just not only in Europe, Japan is going to be a source of tension after they rapidly modernize from industrialization and militarizing and start their imperial trek and fight in World War I. They're going to be reaping havoc across Eastern Asia, and they're going to start taking up an expansionist foreign policy, which is going to threaten the interest of the Western powers, the US, Britain, etc. Germany is also going to be weak and going to be resentful. Members of the League are ignoring the central idea that they're trying to create cooperation and maintain peace. Turkey successfully challenges the Paris Peace Conference. Japan running around Eastern Europe, border disputes plaguing Europe, successor states mostly on the brink of collapsing, and the USA is back to isolationism. So what do? Well, obviously tension is pretty high, but no country really wants war with any other, or at least not yet. So there's going to be a few attempts to resolve some of these tensions. The first one, Washington Naval Conference. First, the US decides to poke its head out of its isolationist hole, isolationism, quote unquote, when stuff starts to stir up and threaten their own interests. You're going to see this a few times, even though the US proclaims isolationism. They kind of pop their head out whenever it makes sense for them to do so and have some sort of big impact when something threatens their own interests. So in 1921, 1922, they host the Washington Naval Conference. The Washington Naval Conference is held to try and reduce tensions from Japanese expansion over in Eastern Asia. This is going to be a meeting between the US, Britain, France, Japan, and other nations. They're going to meet in Washington, D.C., and they're going to put together a few treaties that try to guarantee peace in Eastern Asia that also benefits everyone, and at the same time, stop Japanese expansion. So a couple treaties that come from it. First up, the Four-Power Treaty. This is the US, Britain, France, and Japan. They agree to deal with future disputes by negotiation instead of war. Also, this is going to end the Anglo-Japanese alliance officially, since Britain is no longer rivals with Germany and needs some sort of defense from Japan. And also, they don't want to get dragged into a war if Japan gets themselves into a war, because with Japan expanding, if they get themselves into a war, the Anglo-Japanese alliance was an alliance, so Britain would then have to go to the defense of Japan. The Five-Power Treaty. US, Britain, France, Italy, Japan. Britain, US, France, Italy, Japan, they all agree to shrink the size of their navies. The Western powers also agree not to develop any new naval bases near Japan. And the Nine-Power Treaty. All countries who are attending the Washington Naval Conference, they are going to affirm the open door policy in China and state that they will protect China from invasion. Now, back in Europe, the Genoa Conference, held in 1922, is mainly dealing with German reparations. 30 countries, including Russia and Germany, that were very isolated, are going to attend. Just not USA, still isolationist, isolationism, quote unquote. Britain is going to attest that reparations are going to be undermining the economic recovery of Europe from World War I, since Germany can't keep up with paying reparations. Britain tries getting support to reduce reparations, but France wants absolutely no part of it. They don't want to reduce reparations. They don't want to make any changes to the Treaty of Versailles, the Paris Peace Conference. Seeing that nothing is going to be accomplished and feeling isolated, Germany's going to back out, and then Russia's going to do the same thing. So Genoa isn't really going to accomplish anything. Germany can't pay reparations. Britain sees that Germany can't pay the reparations, and failure to pay reparations is not helping the European economy recover from World War I. France still hates Germany to the moon and back. They're not willing to reduce reparations, and they demand that they're paid in full. This conference is going to wind up failing from a lack of consensus, and also France is just unwilling to negotiate. If anything, it fails, and then also leads to something that is equally not good, potentially even worse, the Rapallo Pact. Both Germany and Russia, they attended Genoa, but they back out once it becomes obvious that nothing is going to get accomplished that's going to help them. them. Both of these countries are relatively isolated. Germany because it's Germany, and Russia because it's communist. That's actually going to wind up pushing them together, and they're going to wind up signing the Treaty of Rapallo, also known as the Rapallo Pact. The treaty is to, quote, cooperate in a spirit of mutual goodwill in meeting the economic needs of both countries, end quote. What does this mean? Well, they're going to try and trade and help each other's economy, but how are they going to do that? Well, by violating the Treaty of Versailles, of course. This is going to lead to military collaboration in the form of Germany building factories in Russia that are going to produce war materials like tanks and planes and artillery and, stuff that they're not supposed to be making by hest of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany is also going to send its military to get trained in Russia to circumnavigate the treaty. Russia also going to modernize their military and learn from the Germans, since they weren't really all that modern during World War I. The Treaty of Rapallo is going to cause alarm bells to go off elsewhere in Europe, particularly from those who wanted Germany to be punished and unable to recover, mainly France, and also those who are fearful of communism spreading outside of Russia, which is pretty much everyone else who dislikes communism. Poland also going to be on edge a bit, since both Germany and Russia had land taken from them to form the independent Poland after World War I, so Poland's security could potentially be threatened too. These tensions are going to come from instability in Europe, the economy post-World War I. France and Belgium, they need to rebuild after being devastated by the war and being ran over by Germany. Britain, they lost a good amount of its merchant fleet for trade. Countries were also supposed to be repaying war debts to the United States, who gave out loans before getting themselves involved. And the U.S. Economy, by the way, during the 1920s is doing really, really well, since the U.S. didn't suffer any damage on the home front. Their economy is going to recover really quickly from World War I, and once they get into the 1920s, they're going to experience a time period known as the Roaring Twenties, which is a time period of economic prosperity from 1921 to 1929. German economy is on the continuous decline. Unemployment is going to be rampant, and there's also this massive fear of communism. Soviet Union forms the Comintern, an alliance of communist nations trying to spread communism. This massive fear of communism is even going to grip the United States too, even though they're all the way across the pond and also isolationist. Vladimir Lenin very much wanted to spread communism. He was the leader of the Russian Revolution. He's the leader of the Bolsheviks, but he's going to realize that Russia's success banked on peaceful relations with more powerful nations. Also, Russia had a really big rivalry with France. Russia took money from France during the war, and they were supposed to pay back afterwards, and Russia refused to pay back. Rapallo Pact is also going to cause great concern with the French as well, because that could potentially threaten French security, because France and Germany's bad blood. The U.S. not ratifying the Paris Peace Conference settlements, not joining the League of Nations, that does a lot of damage too. The most powerful nation of the world not joining the League of Nations kind of makes it seem not really that credible, even though Woodrow Wilson's the one who came up with it. Although they keep collecting loans from Britain and France, and by the way, Britain and France are kind of reliant on the reparations payments in order to make these loan payments back to the U.S. on the U.S. loan debt. But anyway, the U.S. goes back to isolationism anyway. French attitude towards Germany is going to be pretty poor. Bad blood between Germany and France all the way back to the Franco-Prussian War and World War I. Germany also overruns France every time they get into a war. After the German defeat in World War I, though, France wants to make sure that Germany can never come back to power, so France tries to keep Germany weak and isolated. But anytime any problems come up, France is absolutely unwilling to budge on reparations, even though it's kind of obvious that Germany can't pay them. And when Germany inevitably falls behind on its reparations payments, France is ready to take extreme measures and recoup their money, which winds up being the Ruhr crisis, and we'll talk about the resolution of the Ruhr crisis in the next chapter. But that's going to do it for section 2.2, and here we go back to the question: how and why did international tensions remain high between 1920 and 1923? Well, it kind of starts off with the U.S. not joining the League of Nations, most powerful nation in the world, not joining the group of nations meant to keep world peace and encourage cooperation after World War I is definitely going to hurt its credibility. The U.S. was much more focused on being isolationist and sitting back and collecting their loan money, even though the European economy is struggling. Germany was weak and isolated from the Treaty of Versailles. They were forced to accept it. The diktat conditions of the treaty imposed on Germany weakens Germany's government and economy, and France is unwilling to work with Germany regarding the hurting of their economy and their government, which mainly came from reparations, which was crushing Germany. France also hates Germany all the way back to the Franco-Prussian War, so bad blood there. Turkey, formerly the Ottoman Empire, is going to be the first to successfully challenge their treaty that was imposed from the Paris Peace Conference. They wind up becoming Turkey, formerly Ottoman Empire, ruled by Kemal Ataturk, establishes the Republic of Turkey, and they're going to challenge the Treaty of Sevres, since that was with the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire was gone. So the new Treaty of Lausanne, is going to rid Turkey of foreign influence, have Turkey officially recognized, and is going to be the first successful challenge of the Paris Peace Conference. Russia is going to continue to be isolated, successor states are going to remain in poor conditions, and that is why tension is going to remain high between 1920 and 1923.